This afternoon where I am. Today is Monday, January 12th, 2026. Happy New Year! And this is Issues and Answers with Norman A. Carter Jr. Moi. We welcome you and all the inhabitants of this blue planet to this installment of Issues and Answers on the WCEG Digital Media Enterprises Network. Yes, that's who we are. Last week I was singing It's June in January. But today I'm singing Baby, it's cold outside. Yes, indeed. Así es la vida. That's the way it goes. We are the Worldwide Community Empowerment Group. We don't just talk about things going on in our broadcast home of Georgia in the US of A, but also concerns that affect this country and this world. No man is an island. No man walks alone. Any man's death diminishes me because I am involved in mankind and therefore never send to know for whom the bell tolls, for it tolls for thee. That's Mr. John Donne from many years ago. And this is a reminder that we cannot isolate from one another. We are all part of the one. We are all citizens of earth created in the image of God. We are all guardians of his creations. So let's live that way. So whether you are in France, Russia, Guam, or Canada, or the US of A, understand that WCEG welcomes you. We are the Worldwide Community Empowerment Group. And in the event you just stumbled over us, let me inform you about the many ways to access our programs. You can log on to WCEG, WCEGtalkradio.com on your computer or mobile device. Click on the icon that says live. You can watch us live on your smart TV. Access the WCEG channel on Roku, YouTube, Fanbase, Blue Sky, and Twitch. Watch us live on Facebook, LinkedIn, and all other social media platforms. If you missed the live broadcast, you may always view us on YouTube at any time after the airing of our live broadcast. If you have Alexa, say, Alexa, play WCEG Talk Radio, and you'll get us. Download our free WCEG mobile app, and you can listen to us on any of our 12 podcast distribution platforms. I mean, we're coming at you in so many ways because we want to get to you. And you know what? If you get us on Facebook, we want to hear from you. Please understand that the topics and opinions are mine and my guests. Have none today. It's all about me. And they neither reflect the opinions of the staff and management of WCEG Digital Media Enterprises. So let's rock, let's roll. Will there be lessons learned? I hope so. I hope. Before I get too far into today's program, I want to send my condolences to the family and friends of Renee Nicole Good of Minneapolis, Minnesota. This mother of three is dead. Just as with George Floyd, we saw her life taken away on television from several angles. For several reasons, this death was unnecessary, but predictable, and was the result of poor decisions by our president, the ICE officer, and sadly, even Renee Good. On February 8th, 2021, on this program, I had three journalists explain to you about the malignancy of Nazi influence in the Republican Party. Most of you, even listeners to this program, ignored that information. 4 months later, CNN ran the same story. Did you pay attention then? ICE has become the president's private army, his Gestapo. Both ICE and the Gestapo have allegiances only to the leader of the country, not the laws of the land. More about that later. Most importantly, when you recognize an entity as a law enforcement officer, do not do as Renee and her partner did. ICE is undertrained legal vigilantes. Unlike police officers, they are not trained in calming down tense situations. They are recruited to be violent and be draconian. You don't bait such people by saying things like, bring it on, because they will. You don't mock them, then try to run away. They will kill you. Don't tell me that if they kill you, they will be arrested and go to jail. That is dumb. You will be dead. We can resolve this situation, but it will not be by throwing snowballs or other items at them. This can be done in November. How about that? There are, at minimum, 140 documented legislators in Congress and the Senate who will stand by the president no matter how lawless or immoral his directives are. They were the ones who stood by him when he orchestrated an attempted violent overthrow of our government. Viewers and listeners, the only sure way to stop the Gestapo tactics of ICE is to vote out of office every supporter of Donald Trump. This will end his Genghis Khan assault, not only on the United States and South America, but also the world. But if you continue to sit on your butts, as you have done in the past, and fight among each other like crabs in a basket, it may be you, your family members, or your neighbors who will become the next victims of Donald Trump's Gestapo. Health note, get your flu vaccines. Seniors, get your pneumonia vaccines. Get your children vaccinated against polio, measles, mumps, diphtheria, tetanus, and human papillomavirus. Why are you listening to a 14-year heroin addict? And he probably has only has accessible veins in his feet by now. Don't let your politics be the vehicle of illness and death for your children. Get them vaccinated and take care of yourself. Also, life does not give you a do-over once you are dead. Trust me, it doesn't happen. Little quote here, folks, from Matthew 7, verses 3 to 5. And I use the Tree of Life Bible because it more accurately depicts what comes from Aramaic and Greek into English than your King James and other Bible versions. So here we go. Quote, Matthew 7, verses 3 to 5. Why do you look at the speck in your brother's eye, but do not notice the beam in your own eye? Or how will you say to your brother, quote, let me take the speck out of your eye, and look, the beam is in your own eye, end quote. This is not going to be a Bible lesson. I'm not qualified. It's just that certain biblical directives I need to hear when I sit in my room and wonder why certain things I say get condemned, altered, ignored, or arouse verbal and sometimes physical reprisals. When I was a police officer and made it known that I would not tolerate corruption or abuse of citizens, I was chastised, ostracized, and ridiculed. When, as a supervisor in the Pennsylvania Office of Inspector General, I was called on the carpet and ridiculed because I conducted investigations which revealed the rich and the powerful were getting away with government benefit fraud because the department and the district attorney's office refused to prosecute them. A lot of you don't know that, do you? You just don't. What are the quotes? This is not the politically correct time, I was told, or it's going to cost us too much money to extradite them from Arizona. Those are real quotes. I didn't make those up. Let me inform you, for those of you who don't know, who live in a shell, that nursing home fraud is the playground for the rich. Yet, a single mother for 4 children who found a little side job to supplement her welfare income is prosecuted to the full extent of the law. I can give you more blatant examples once we have a program dedicated to that topic in the future. Now, if I give verifiable information about the disproportionate number of violent crimes committed by Black people on Black people, I get grumblings, criticism, and finger pointing at everything but the real problem: the way we speak to and treat each other, and how we tolerate violent problem resolution until it knocks at our front door. Fleeing from reality changes nothing. How many of you Atlantans have forgotten Socoria Turner, yet you remember Trayvon Martin? Darn shame. No wonder things don't get better. No wonder, no matter how far away you move, the same crap persists. We are quick to embrace names like Bone Crusher, Killer Mike, Notorious, Ghostface Killer, 8 Ball, Tech Nine, Stack Bundles, and other disparaging names, along with the uncivil behavior that goes with those names. The way you look at and describe yourself weighs heavily on the way others view and treat you. Wake up, please. We are doing to ourselves what the KKK wishes they could do. Think about that. Really, think about that. I have so much to talk about today, but firstly, let's not be hypocrites in 2026. Eddie Kendricks had a song entitled, Girl, You Need a Change of Mind. Perhaps we need a song entitled, Folks, We Need a Change of Mind. Today, I would like to speak a little bit about history and how that affects our current events. Firstly, let me get something off my chest. For hundreds of years, the accomplishments of Black people, especially African Americans, has been either suppressed or completely written out of history. That is why it burns my butt when African Americans belittle the accomplishments of people such as Martin Luther King, Rosa Parks, Malcolm X, James Meredith, Medgar Evers, James L. Chaney, Michael Schwimmer, Andrew Goodman, and many others. It is why I hated the first Barbershop movie and refused to watch any sequel. Shortly after the movie was viewed, Cedric the Entertainer stated he ad-libbed the disparaging remarks he made about Martin Luther King, a freak, and Rosa Parks. She only sat the hell down and had no regrets. Our known heroes are so few, and we have enough negativity coming from racists. The last things we need are insults directed at these civil rights icons. He still laughs about it. Most of you have no problem with it. You flock to his TV programs boycotting Donald Trump's press conferences. That's because you're too busy boycotting his conferences. It's your choice to support those who mock your heritage. I won't. I'm not a hypocrite. Are you? Suppose Adam Sandler said the same remarks. Would you laugh and impatiently await his next movie? It's called selective outrage. Sometimes we are our own worst enemy, whether embracing derogatory monikers or tolerating violence in our neighborhoods. For the love of money. Come on, OJs, sing the song. Frank Wills. How many of you can instantly recall who he is and what he did? 10 seconds, 10 seconds. That's all you get. If I asked you who sang Say It Loud, I'm Black and I'm Proud, you would recall James Brown's name in 5 seconds. Where is your pride? I gave you 10 seconds on this man, Frank Wills. Get it yet? It was he and his diligent, honest work that brought down a president of the United States. I have been to 3 civil rights museums and have never seen his name or picture. He is an American hero. After he did his job and reported a major crime, he could never hold another job. He died poor. He died broken. Frank Wills was the security guard who uncovered the Watergate burglary that resulted in the first resignation from office of a president of the United States. The retaliation against him was severe. Employers feared retaliation from Republican leaders if they hired him. No one gave him a parade. He was a pariah. Now, in case you're locked on stupid and don't believe his fate was determined by politics, allow me to offer you a few facts. Most of the burglars at Watergate had either former or current connections to our Central Intelligence Agency. Now, Dorothy Hunt, probably forgot about her, didn't you? I had never had and never will. Dorothy Hunt was the wife of one of the burglars, Howard Hunt. She threatened to expose information about the burglary unless she was paid $10,000 in cash. After receiving the money, she and the pilot of the private plane she flew were killed in a mysterious plane crash. These criminals were serious. Frank Wills must have lived with both fear and frustration. He was 24 when he discovered the burglary. He died when he was 52. He lived in fear and frustration for doing a good thing that benefited the country, and nobody helped him. At his funeral, Congressman James Mann of South Carolina gave him this eulogy. Quote, if there is no accountability, another president will feel free to do as he chooses. But the next time, there may be no watchman in the night. End quote. How pathetic for today's state of our country is that watchman in the night? Where is that watchman in the night? I love this next segment. It's called What Ice Has Wrought. And I'm not talking about the ice in your refrigerator. Renee Good of Minneapolis was the victim of a homicide last week. No doubt about it, It was a homicide. Can't call it anything else but that. She was shot and killed by an immigration and customs enforcement agent, called them ICE, last week. There is tremendous public outrage, but some things I don't understand. Number one, an ICE agent killed Renee Good, but protesters threw snowballs at Minneapolis police officers who had nothing to do with ICE's activities. In fact, ICE refused to communicate with the local police before and after the killing. It misplaced outrage. You just want to hurt somebody. Well, you go hurting the wrong people. You're hurting the people who are for you. I definitely know how that feels. Number two, if an ICE agent killed a woman for apparently nothing, why would you throw things at them, yell curses at them, or attack them physically in any way? The president and the Justice Department are not here to protect you. ICE is the president's personal police department, and just as Hitler's stormtroopers, they are to accomplish his mission without regards to laws or morality. Here's some current events for you who shut your eyes to reality. Remember, the president said last week, not last month, not last year, not 10 years ago, last week, the president said he is answerable only to, quote, his morality, end quote, and is not restricted by domestic or international laws. If you don't wake up and understand that, you might end up as dead as Renee Good. Number three, armed people with masks. And I want everyone to pay attention to this. Armed people with masks look that way because their behavior is likely to exceed legal guidelines. Notice the demeanor of those two women when confronted by masked ICE agents. They were smiling. They were confrontational. They were defiant. Remember the woman who said, "Bring it on"? You don't make that statement to unhinged and unrestricted minds. You will get exactly what you asked for. Ask WCEG's Javon Brown, as he wrote, "Let this be, quote, a lesson learned," end quote. His book is still available at Amazon.com. I checked it out the other day. Don't taunt these people, folks. They're not your local police officers that you can go out and taunt and call names and throw stuff at them, and they'll just look at you and say, I'll get you the next time. No, these people look to retaliate. They've been told to do that by the President of the United States of America. When are you guys going to wake up? Which flows right into my next session, which is called "Have You No Decency, Sir?" Closed in quotes. Most of you are too young to remember the infamous McCarthy hearings. Joe McCarthy was a vengeful bully who single-handedly wielded enough power to ruin the lives and careers of many. If you ever watched the original version of the movie The Manchurian Candidate and viewed the bombastic senator played by James McGregor, who you will see a near accurate portrayal of Senator Joe McCarthy. His was among the first hearings televised on that relatively new contraption called a television. I was old enough to watch portions of this and the Kefauver hearings. That's how old I am. The McCarthy hearings were supposed to uncover operatives of the Communist Party in America. That was little more than a pretense. These hearings were malicious and vicious. At one point in those hearings, McCarthy began to mercilessly bash Army Counsel Joseph Welch about one of his lawyers in his law firm. Welch broke into McCarthy's bashing with the historic phrase, "Have you no decency, sir?" Those words marked the beginning of the end of the hearings and the ending of McCarthy's political career. Sadly, we are at that point here in America. We have an unethical, unhinged president who last week said, when asked about what constraints does he respect, said this: "Yeah, there's one thing, my own morality, my own mind. It's the only thing that can stop me, and that's very good." End quote. When the reporter asks, quote, "not international law?" End quote. President Trump responded, "I don't need international law. I'm not looking to hurt people." End quote. Keep in mind, he ordered the bombing of boats leaving Venezuela that were assumed to be carrying illegal drugs. When one boat was destroyed but showed two survivors, on the orders of General Kane, appointed by President Trump, those unarmed survivors were bombed again while they were helplessly floating in the water. That, America, is a war crime. There is no equivocation that justifies it. Absolutely none. It's a war crime. Yet so called Christian Americans debate this. Yet none can find a regulation, a policy, a declaration that says it is okay to kill unarmed civilians. Don't you folks remember Lieutenant William Calley, who was tried, convicted, and sentenced to imprisonment for ordering his troops to kill unarmed women and children in Vietnam? Are you so politically blind that your soul is poisoned? It is no wonder that people who tolerate the killing of unarmed people by our military find nothing wrong with ICE agents killing unarmed Americans. Do you always look at Sean Hannity or Greg Gutless Gutfeld to determine what you're supposed to think? Is your thinking mechanism handicapped? Obviously, many of you don't have the ability to think independently, and you are, quote, proud, end quote. And to them, I ask, have you no decency? DEI hire. I hope my Philadelphia friends are listening. I hope the world is listening. I hope my Republican friends, neighbors, colleagues are listening, because I'm sick and tired of hearing this term, DEI hire. Whether you are a racist in the closet or out of it, or whether you are just an under the woodpile handkerchief head, there are some things that are out of bounds in a civil society. On Saturday, a Philadelphia digital creator who happens to be African American called Sheriff Rochelle Blau, the head of Philadelphia Sheriff's Department, a DEI hire because she clearly criticized the lawlessness of some ICE agents. I found that offensive and an abomination coming from the mouth of a black man. It clearly showed his ignorance. Sheriff Bilal is an elected official, twice elected, and not someone who was hired. To refer to her in that term is a slap not only against her, but also the thousands of people who voted for her in a city that is as diverse as any large city can be. Now, some will say that I'm over exaggerating by calling it a racist term. Here's the proof. When a disabled freighter floated into and destroyed the McKinley Bridge in Baltimore, Maryland, the governor of Maryland, Wes Moore, a black man and a graduate of Oxford University, was called a DEI hire by highly placed Republican candidates, Republican elected officials, and racists in general. Both Sheriff Rochelle Bilal and Governor Wes Moore are elected officials. Both are African American. They were, quote, hired, end quote, by voters who deemed them worthy to lead. When an Army helicopter collided with a passenger plane over the Potomac River, it was blamed on DEI hires in the Army and air traffic control. Ladies and gentlemen, it is clear as the healed left ear on Donald Trump's head that DEI hire is the new euphemism for the N word. One of the president's biggest supporters and confidants, Elon Musk, said it. He said he would never board an airplane with a black pilot. Yet here we are today with black people clinging to that clause the same way they cling to using the N word. It's dehumanizing, it's self-defeating, just in the same way I criticize people who misuse, due to ignorance, the term woke. I will continue to criticize the MAGA butt kissers who continually use the term DEI hire. I know, and we all should know what you mean. So consider yourselves outed. Let's move on. I want to talk a little bit about the Venezuela and the Monroe Doctrine. Now, Trump claimed that under Maduro, Venezuela had hosted foreign adversaries in our region and acquired menacing offensive weapons that could threaten U.S. interests and lives, end quote. I wonder if those weapons were weapons of mass destruction. Remember that big lie? Remember that? Quote from Trump, all of these actions were in gross violation of the core principles of American foreign policy, dating back more than 2 centuries, Trump said. Quote, all the way back, it dated to the Monroe Doctrine. And the Monroe Doctrine is a big deal. But we've superseded it by a lot, by a real lot. They now call it the Donroe Doctrine, end quote. These last words, the quote, Donroe Doctrine, end quote, shows everyone how sick and how egotistical this proven racist and misogynist is. Not to worry, the Black Republicans of Georgia believe this man is God's gift to humanity. even though this man has neither love nor respect for people of color. It is sad. It is sad when people self-shelter under a woodpile. It's sad. But let's get back to the Monroe Doctrine. It's not law. It's not in the Constitution. It's a foreign policy adopted by President James Monroe in 1823. 1823, 200 years ago. It discourages any European power. Now, keep in mind, we had just come out of the Revolutionary War. We had just come out of the War of 1812, 1823. It discourages any European power from having any further colonization. Hear that? Any further colonization in the Western Hemisphere. Remember, it was and is a policy and not a law. In 1904, getting a little bit closer to now, President Theodore Roosevelt added to the Monroe Doctrine by asserting that the United States has the right to intervene in Central and South American nations to prevent European interference. This was called the Roosevelt Corollary of 1904. Look that up. Look it up. As such, he designated America, not his words, but mine, as the police agency of the Western Hemisphere. This justified numerous American interventions in countries such as Cuba, Nicaragua, Haiti, Dominican Republic, and others. This transformed the Monroe Doctrine from a defensive policy to an interventionist policy. Anytime we felt as if our interests were in jeopardy, we could and can impose ourselves on the government of any country in the Western Hemisphere. Excuse me, keep in mind, this is a policy. It's not a law. It wasn't approved, by Congress. It's a policy. Excuse me. Example. Have you ever wondered why, and I did, the United States has a military base on Guantanamo Bay in Cuba? Here's the explanation. During the 1898 Spanish-American War, U.S. forces invaded Cuba amid its war of independence against Spain. In 1901, an American drafted amendment to the Cuban Constitution nominally recognized Cuba's sovereignty while allowing the U.S. to intervene in local affairs and establish naval bases on land leased or purchased from the Cuban government. The Cuban-American Treaty of Relations of 1903 reaffirmed these provisions, and that same year, the Guantanamo Bay Naval Base was established pursuant to a lease agreement with no expiration date. The 1934 Cuban-American Treaty of Relations superseded much of the 1903 treaty, but reaffirmed that the Guantanamo Bay lease, under which Cuba retains ultimate sovereignty, but the U.S. exercises sole jurisdiction. Is that cray-cray? Is it cray-cray or what? But, so therefore, when Donald Trump speaks of invoking the Monroe Doctrine, which he now calls the Donroe Doctrine, he is historically on solid ground. That does not mean it's legal. It does not mean it's moral. There has been an American history of this type of nonsense since 1823. This was the basis of the Cuban Missile Crisis of 1960. Have you forgotten the Iran-Contra scandal? The Iran-Contra affair was a political scandal in the United States during the 1980s involving secret arms sales to Iran and the diversion of proceeds to fund Contra rebels in Nicaragua. Despite congressional prohibitions, Congress prohibited that. It was against the law. It was an illegal arms intervention under President Ronald Reagan. Oh, they love Ronald Reagan, don't they? Now, Colonel Ollie North sacrificed himself to keep Ronald Reagan from being impeached. Uh, he never really suffered for that, but he sacrificed himself. So, as with the Watergate burglary crew, he went on to have a successful career as a right wing radio star, talk radio star. Do you see a pattern here? Are you listening? The Monroe Doctrine and the Roosevelt Corollary gave us justification to invade Grenada in 1983 to end communist influence in their government. It justified Operation Just Cause, which was a U.S. military action, December 1989 to January 1990, that centered on the invasion of Panama for the purposes of removing General Manuel Noriega, the country's dictatorial de facto ruler, removing him from power and extraditing him to the U.S. to face charges of drug trafficking and money laundering. Does that sound familiar? When is the last time you heard anything about Noriega? He's in prison. You hear nothing about this guy, ever. No more. So let's keep in mind that this is not a law. It's not in our Constitution. It's a policy that eliminates the need to get permission from Congress for any military action in the Western Hemisphere. Therefore, the will of the people of this country becomes irrelevant because the Monroe Doctrine and the Roosevelt Corollary leave this life and death decision up to the whims of the president. And when you have a Hitlerian president such as Donald Trump, that is dangerous. But it's not surprising. He has taken this action, that he has taken this action. Is there a Commonwealth of Venezuela in our future? Allow me to explain. Let's go back to January 2025, when many of you were led by the nose by a misguided but power-hungry journalist to boycott Donald Trump's presidential inauguration. If you were an independent and wise thinker, you watched as Trump refused to touch the Bible as he swore to uphold our Constitution. Was that because he feared being struck by a lightning bolt from heaven? If you refused to watch this inauguration, you would have missed Trump forcefully stating that he was prepared to enforce the Monroe Doctrine all the way to Mars. He threatened to annex Mexico, Canada, and take Greenland by force if necessary. He threatened to use military force to put down any peaceful protest not to his liking. He promised to take whatever steps necessary to deport 11 million illegal immigrants. Today, he is actively working to fulfill those inaugural promises. But far too many of you are surprised. Think about that the next time someone demands that you boycott an inauguration, a State of the Union address, or a press conference. You need to stop bending to the minds of those who seek to keep you deaf, dumb, and blind, quoting Malcolm X here, to what is happening in your neighborhoods and in your country. Next section. We're winding up here. Got to go soon. Next section is titled Make America Great Again. Really? Those of you who have seen my amateurish program announcements on Facebook notice that I posted pictures of three presidents under the heading, Have we iced our American ideals? Have we no decency? Those presidents, Andrew Jackson, Andrew Johnson, and Woodrow Wilson, are heroes of the current president, Donald Trump. When he talks about MAGA, meaning Make America Great Again, he is referring to the policies of these presidents, all of whom were segregationists. One, Jackson, believed Native Americans were subhuman, and he instituted policies that resulted in the death of an estimated 130 million indigenous Americans. Think about that. 130 million indigenous Americans dead. Even Hitler wasn't that bad. But think about the Trail of Tears, the massacre at Wounded Knee, Custer slaughtering hundreds in a village occupied by women, elderly men, and children. The list goes on. These are Trump's heroes. Therefore, his behavior in pursuit of joining the legacy of these infamous American leaders should be of no surprise to anyone. This is why I find it abhorrent that Americans would listen to anyone who tells us not to listen to anything this man says. He is unfiltered enough to tell you everything he plans to do and how he plans to do it. Remember, this is the man who told you that he could shoot someone in the middle of Fifth Avenue and not lose voters. That, America, is true. This last election proves that. There are millions of people who love the fact that he is a xenophobe when it comes to non-whites, excuse me, who come from, quote, S-hole countries, end quote. Once again, that's his quote, not mine. Once again, this month, he asked having more immigrants come here from Norway. Now, that is not unlike Adolf Hitler and his promoting the myth of Aryan superiority. Why is this so difficult to comprehend? It isn't really. Many of us understand this and find it immoral and un-American. But there are millions who understand this and believe this is what they want in America. Excuse me, must be talking too much here. These folks, let me tell you about these folks that want this for America. They lost the battle to keep schools and jobs segregated. They lost the battle to preserve civil rights only for the rich and middle class whites. They lost the battle to keep African Americans from having the right to vote. They lost the battle to keep women as second class Americans and unfit for equitable employment and leadership opportunities. MAGA means undoing all of those losses and bringing back the policies of Jackson, Johnson, and Wilson. By its very name, MAGA is a regressive movement. But don't tell that to the Black Republicans of Georgia. They don't remember when stellar college level Black quarterbacks were drafted into the National Football League and forced to take on roles such as wide receiver or defensive back. That was the same belief system that allowed Donald Trump to make a flunky and storefront dummy out of world-class neurosurgeon Ben Carson and give him a cabinet position as head of housing and urban development simply because Carson once lived in a housing project. How come he couldn't have been Surgeon General? He was qualified. Oh, we don't want a black man in that position. I get it. Can any of you name one policy or one piece of legislation that was authored and promoted by Ben Carson? You can't, because there are none. That is the classic description of racism. That is disempowerment. That is promoted by Donald Trump and embraced by his MAGA bootlickers. But Candace Owens and America's ambassador to the Bahamas, Herschel Walker, think this is just fine. It's just fine. Let's talk about voting as we move on. You have often heard me say on this broadcast that shackling oneself to one particular party is quickly becoming old fashioned and not productive. Excuse me. If you have listened to news pundits, candidates, and political experts, political candidates in office and running for office are tailoring their campaigns to cater to independents because they are always assured that non-thinking political party devotees will vote for them no matter what. But recent major elections, think about this, recent major elections have been determined by independent voters and not party loyalists. In a new Gallup poll published today, 45% of adult voters classify themselves as independents. This has been a growing trend for years. It's about time for everyone to wake up. But many of you won't listen. I understand that. Just know that if you are a stuck Republican or a stuck Democrat, you are rapidly becoming a minority and your political voice is slowly ebbing away. Smoke from a cigarette is going away, just fading away. But that's been our program for today, our first program. And if some of you may have noticed a Facebook post, I'm going to close out with this because I believe that the thoughts of many and the ideas of many are what make this country great. Not just Democrats, not just Republicans, not just independents, but different ideas coming in. And somewhere along in the middle, we come out with something great. I have invited so many Republicans to come on this program, but they're all scared. Unless you are a bootlicker, they don't want to be interviewed by a black man. Oh, they're going to trap us. How can I trap you? The crux of the matter is you're running to represent all people, not just white people, not just black bootlickers. You're in voting. You are wanting to represent all people, and you should be able and willing to take on all questions. I mean, I on this program, if you go back and listen, I think I've embarrassed some black folks who some Democrats who were running when I asked them a question, especially local here in Georgia. You talk about reparations. But what are you doing about the tens of thousands of Atlanta kids who were shortchanged in their education because of the Atlanta teaching scandal? It wasn't that long ago. Not one black politician, not one Democrat has ever taken on that topic. Not one. And the reason being is that these children who were predominantly black, nobody cared about them. Not even their black parents, not even the black leaders of their community, not even Democrats who profess to be for everybody, not even Republicans. Nobody taking up for these kids. No program, no TV anywhere, nothing has ever dealt with that issue. That's because when it comes to that topic, the fact of the matter is that because the people who were guilty of shortchanging those children were predominantly African American, oh, we don't want to deal with that. The same way we don't want to deal with black crime, black on black crime. Oh, we don't want to talk about that. Let's talk about what the white folks are doing to us. That's the real problem. Hey, white folks weren't going to the East Point train station to kill people the other day, were they? But anyway, I'm going into a different rant. Excuse me, running out of time. It's been great. This is program number one of what I hope to be a fruitful year. I've invited several politicians and inviting more. I'd like to get someone from the NRA to come on here. I put that offer out. They're all scared. They don't want to answer questions. They rather go to Fox, where they get patted on the head and say, nice boy. A lot of Democratic politicians don't want to come on here either because they want to talk to people who will make nice to them. They don't want to talk to people who will ask them tough questions. They don't. Unbelievable. Hopefully things will change. Hopefully things will change for the better. But issues and answers will be right here talking about issues that affect Georgia, America, that affect the world, because that's who I am. I am a man of the world. I embrace all of mankind, all of mankind. And that's how I'll live for the rest of my life. And I hope all of you do too. So thank you for joining us today on WCEG's Digital Media Enterprises. And we'll see you again soon, right here on Issues and Answers on this network. Have a good day. Bye-bye.